The jungle did not sleep that night. Every leaf trembled under the whisper of a wind that carried old grief. Deep within the tangled roots and shadowed vines, a clearing burned faintly, a single bonfire licking the damp air. Around it, fireflies floated like lost spirits. And beside the dying flame lay something immense, breathing softly, as though the earth itself sighed with it. It was not a beast born of this age. The creature's scales shimmered in the dark like cooled iron, etched with thin veins of crimson light, the heart fire of something ancient. Smoke drifted from his nostrils, curling like memories he could not yet name. His claws twitched, his chest rose with the deep rhythm of a soul returning from centuries of silence. Then came the whisper, faint as a forgotten prayer. "Remember me, remember what they did." The dragon stirred. His eyelids opened like stone doors grinding against time. Beneath them burned two eyes, molten gold rimmed in sorrow. For a long while, he stared at the fire before him, the reflection of its glow twisting within his gaze. Flames mirrored flames, but these were not mere campfire sparks. They were fragments of something once human. He tried to speak, but the sound that came was a low growl mixed with thunder. Only when the bonfire flickered low did the images begin to bleed into his mind. Pieces of a life that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. An old cottage, a young man with trembling hands, laughter echoing across a hill where hobbits danced around barrels of ale. Then, the laughter twisting, mocking, his name spat like a curse. The memory of fire, the scent of burnt wood and betrayal. He reared his head slightly, a low rumble trembling through the clearing. The jungle beasts fell silent. Even the wind dared not move. His claws scraped against stone, slow, uncertain, as if testing whether the world was real. And then came the pain. It rushed through his veins like molten gold, searing memory into muscle and bone. He saw his old body again, frail, human, kneeling before a circle of torchlight. He had begged them. He had trusted them, and they had thrown him into the pit. The hobbits, he remembered, had not always been kind. Once, deep in their hidden valley, there had been a man they feared, a keeper of forgotten fire, a blacksmith who forged charms of power. They had called him the Old Ember. When famine struck, they accused him of dark magic, of cursing their fields. The judgment was swift. He was bound, mocked, and buried alive beneath their hill, his curse carried into the soil. But curses are stubborn things. They do not die. They wait. Now, centuries later, that same soul breathed again, trapped inside the scaled prison of vengeance. He looked at his claws, at the cracks of light pulsing within his chest. The jungle trembled with his breath. And far beyond the trees, the world slept unaware that its silence had been broken. A voice spoke within him again, no longer whispering, but steady and cold. "They took your fire. Take it back." He rose. Slowly, the weight of his body shifted, the ground splitting under his talons. The bonfire flared, as if in recognition. Around him, vines twisted back, leaves shuddering. The jungle seemed to sense what had returned. He looked to the sky, but it was hidden, a black canopy of leaves, stitched with mist. The stars had no courage to pierce through. Only faint glows of fireflies circled him, their light trembling like frightened eyes. And yet, beneath the horror, there was sorrow. For even monsters remember love. A memory drifted through his mind, a child's laughter, soft and distant. A promise whispered to a girl whose name he could no longer recall. He felt her warmth for a heartbeat. then saw her vanish beneath the laughter of those same hobbits. Rage clawed at his heart again. He spread his wings, vast and jagged, their edges glowing like molten steel. When he moved them, the trees bent as though kneeling. His roar rolled through the night, shaking dust from the stars. In that moment, the jungle awoke. Birds burst from treetops, animals fled through the underbrush, and the fire cracked like thunder. He did not yet know his name, but he remembered theirs. The dragon stepped forward, the ground smoking beneath each footfall. Behind him, the bonfire dimmed, its light swallowed by the glow of his veins. The jungle parted before him as if afraid to stand in his path. His wings brushed the air once more, and a storm began to form in the distance, a crimson storm, born of heat and memory. He turned once more toward the dying fire, the place where he had awoken, and in the flicker of its last ember, he saw something shimmer within the ashes, a piece of metal, blackened but unbroken, a fragment of a ring. His ring, the ring they had stolen from his hand before casting him into the pit. He lowered his head and breathed upon it, softly, like a prayer. The metal glowed again, alive with ancient fire. And in that moment, he finally spoke, his voice deep and trembling like the roots of the world. "Let them remember me in fire." The jungle echoed back his words. The old soul had awakened. The jungle was never still again after the dragon's first roar. Every living thing seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what the night had summoned. Beneath the canopy, a pale mist crept low over the roots, wrapping trees like shrouds around graves. The air was thick with the taste of iron and ash. Each step the dragon took pressed the earth deeper into memory, and the forest began to whisper. At first, it was only the sound of wind through leaves. But as he moved, it grew sharper, voices murmuring from the bark, from the soil, from the stones that lined the hidden paths. He paused beside a fallen tree, steam rising from his nostrils, and listened. "Do you remember, old one?" The voice was soft, echoing, like breath slipping through hollow wood. "You lit the first fire here, before they came." He turned his head slowly, his golden eyes narrowing. The mist shifted, and a figure formed, faint, translucent, shaped like a man, but with branches twisting through his chest. It was not alive, but it remembered life. Its hollow eyes glowed faintly as it drifted closer. "I forged the world's warmth." The dragon's voice rumbled low, almost uncertain, like a forgotten melody being found. "And they stole it." The spirit tilted its head. "Then take it back," it whispered. "But fire consumes all, even the one who tends it." The dragon's chest burned brighter, and the spirit dissolved into ash, scattered by the beat of his breath. He stepped forward again. The jungle grew darker, denser. What little moonlight filtered through the canopy now broke against the smoke curling around his body. Everywhere he looked, he saw remnants of what had been done: broken tools, charred wooden masks, the remnants of a forgotten village buried beneath roots. The vines hung heavy with bones, and the air carried a faint humming, like children singing under their breath. He passed through an arch of stone cracked with age. Strange symbols glowed faintly across it, Hobbit runes, carved in mockery of power they had stolen. As he brushed past, the carvings flared bright and then burned away, melting into the rock as though terrified of him. A clearing opened beyond. The ground was uneven, split open by old battle scars, and at its center stood a tree so vast its roots seemed to pierce the world. Around its base were dozens of small stones, graves. Hobbit graves. The dragon's eyes narrowed. He could still feel the echoes of their laughter, the chanting, the torchlight circling him like a crown of flames before the earth swallowed him whole. He lowered his head toward the graves, his scales hissing as rain began to fall. Each drop turned to steam when it touched him. "Are you watching, little thieves?" he murmured. "Do you see what your mercy made?" The ground trembled faintly, as if in answer. From beneath the graves, faint blue lights flickered. They rose slowly, one by one. Tiny souls, shaped like the hobbits who once lived here, their faces twisted not in joy but fear. The dragon watched them float upward like sparks from an unseen fire. He should have felt triumph. Instead, something else stirred sorrow, because he remembered them as they were before the cruelty, before fear turned them to monsters. He stepped back, his tail curling around the roots. His voice came out softer, more human. "I gave you warmth," he said. "You gave me fire." The spirits did not answer. They hovered in silence, their light fading into the mist. Only the tree remained, its trunk split with a hollow large enough for a man, or something that had once been one. From inside came a faint humming, not of voices now, but of heartbeats. He moved closer. Inside the hollow, deep within the trunk, something pulsed, a shard of obsidian etched with runes. When he looked upon it, the world around him seemed to twist. The jungle melted, replaced by flashes of another time, fields of green, the laughter of children, the clang of hammers on anvils, and his own hands, human hands, shaping a blade that glowed with living flame. The blade, his creation, he had forged it to protect them. He roared, a sound so loud the very air split apart. The vision shattered. The trunk exploded outward, scattering bark and ash. The shard fell to the ground, and he looked upon it again, and saw reflected not his face, but that of an old man with weary eyes and soot-stained skin. Therald Ember, he whispered, his own name, remembered at last. And with it came everything else. He saw the day they dragged him through the village square, saw their fear, saw his fire used against him. He felt again the pit opening beneath his feet, their laughter ringing in his ears as the earth swallowed his screams. He had cursed them as he fell, and the earth had listened. The dragon drew back, his claws carving trenches in the soil. The jungle shuddered. Lightning flashed through the mist, splitting trees, igniting the wet air with ghostly blue light. The rain hissed on his scales, steam swirling upward like spirits fleeing his rage. He began to walk again, deeper into the forest, toward where the air grew hotter and the light dimmer. The whispers followed him, a chorus of ancient guilt. Each step seemed to echo twice, once in the present, once in the past. The jungle was no longer just a place. It was a memory, endless and looping, built from everything he had lost. The fire inside him pulsed faster. He could feel the old man's heart beating within the dragon's chest, one rhythm, two souls, merging. He was not just a monster now. He was a wound walking the earth. Through the trees, faint light glimmered, the mouth of a cave. Smoke drifted from it, and the scent of sulfur hung heavy. He knew that place before he saw it fully. His home, the cave where Therald Ember had once worked the forge that warmed 100 hobbit homes, before they cast him into the darkness beneath it. He paused at its entrance, talons digging into the mud. The mist coiled around him like hands trying to pull him back, to stop him from seeing what awaited inside. But there was no turning away now. The forest behind him went silent again, utterly, fearfully silent, as the dragon stepped into the cave of his own memory. The mouth of the cave yawned before him like a wound that never healed. Its edges glowed faintly with embers, as if the mountain itself remembered the fire it once contained. The dragon hesitated at the threshold, his molten eyes reflecting the orange pulse of light within. For a long moment, he only listened, to the rain hissing behind him, to the hollow breath of the stone ahead, and to the sound of his own heart, echoing like a forge hammer in the dark. Then he stepped forward. The ground cracked under his weight. Heat rose to meet him, old heat, familiar and wrong. The smell of iron and soot clung to the walls. His claws left streaks of fire where they scraped against the stone, lighting the tunnel in broken flickers. Shadows trembled, bending with each breath he took. And there, in the dimness, he saw the ghosts of his past. The cave reshaped itself as he moved, each step birthing fragments of another life. Walls melted into workshop shelves lined with half-forged blades. Piles of coal shimmered back into being. The air filled with the metallic ring of hammers, the hiss of quenching oil, the murmured songs of apprentices. He walked among them, a beast moving through the memory of a man. Therild Ember's forge had once been a place of laughter. Young hobbits had come here with wide eyes and eager hands, learning the art of shaping light into warmth. He remembered their faces now, every one of them, smiling, grateful, innocent, until famine came, until fear took hold, until they believed warmth itself had betrayed them. The vision twisted, the forge fire dimmed, the laughter turned to shouts. He saw himself, human, bound and dragged across the floor. His tools smashed. His name spat like poison. Witch fire, they had called him. Cursed flame. He saw the hobbit elders' faces glowing in the torchlight, eyes wide with holy dread. They had burned his forge, his books, his apprentices, and then they had buried him beneath it, alive. The dragon stopped, trembling. His breath came out in clouds of molten mist. The cave around him pulsed with red light, as if remembering the flames of that night. He roared, and the illusion shattered. The forge melted back into rock, but the echoes remained, faint, pleading cries trapped in the stone. He lowered his head, claws digging into the ground, smoke curling from his nostrils. I gave you fire to keep the dark away, he growled, and you gave me the dark instead. The cave answered with a deep groan, the sound of stone remembering grief. From the far wall, a faint light began to glow, golden, trembling. The dragon moved toward it. Embedded in the rock was a circle of runes, pulsing like a heartbeat. The old sigil of his craft, carved by his own hands in another life. It was cracked now, leaking molten light like blood. He touched it with a claw. The world convulsed. The walls fell away, and for an instant he stood again as Therild, old, frail, his hands black with soot, his eyes still bright with pride. Around him, the hobbits chanted, their voices a rising storm. The pit opened beneath his feet. He fell. The fire followed him down. But this time, he did not vanish. The dragon's body reappeared in the same place, massive and burning, forcing the vision into reality. The runes blazed, crawling up the cave walls like veins of molten gold. The air trembled. Lava seeped from cracks in the ground, swirling around his feet in rings of light. The cave became alive again, but this time, it was not a forge. It was an inferno. He could feel it, the merging of what he was and what he had become. The old man's sorrow fused with the dragon's fury until they were indistinguishable. Pain surged through him, not from wounds, but from the sheer weight of remembering too much. Flames began to drip from his wings. His veins flared like rivers of light beneath the scales. He roared again, a sound that wasn't rage but mourning. The ceiling trembled, stalactites fell and turned to dust before touching him. And then the whispers returned, hundreds of them, the voices of the dead hobbits whose graves he had passed. They filled the cave like a storm. "Monster, witch, you brought this on yourself." Their words circled him, burning shapes into the smoke. But among them, one voice stood apart, softer, sorrowful, familiar. "Therald, stop." He turned. The mist shaped itself into a figure, a woman's outline, faint as breath on glass. Her face was hidden, but he knew the voice. It was hers, the apprentice he had once loved like a daughter, the one who had begged them to spare him, the one who had died when they burned the forge. For a heartbeat, the fire dimmed. "Leave me," he whispered. "I can't," she said. "You are what remains of me too." Her hand, or the illusion of one, reached toward him, touching his snout. He felt nothing, but in that nothing was memory. The warmth of her trust, the laughter in her eyes. It was the only thing that had ever kept him human. He wanted to hold on to it, but fire devours what it loves. Her image flickered, melting into smoke. The runes on the wall exploded, and the cave filled with light so bright the world itself seemed to scream. When it faded, the dragon was alone again, but the old man's sorrow had curdled into something unrecognizable. Vengeance. He looked down at his claws, dripping molten light onto the stone. "They wanted a monster," he said quietly. "Let them have one." The cave responded, not with words, but with thunder. The walls split open, revealing a path that led upward, out toward the storm. He spread his wings, fire running down their veins like rivers of lightning. His reflection shimmered in the molten pools around him, half man, half dragon, and all fury. The last remnant of Therald Ember, the human spark, flickered inside him, whispering one final question before silence. "When the fire dies, what will be left of you?" He did not answer. He only turned toward the opening, toward the night that awaited, and stepped through the storm of smoke and flame. Behind him, the cave collapsed, sealing his past inside forever. The dawn never came that day. Only a gray half-light, heavy with ash, crept across the jungle. Smoke coiled above the trees in slow spirals, and the wind carried the taste of fire long before its glow reached the horizon. Somewhere beyond the hills, where the forest thinned into meadows, lay a small hobbit settlement, new and peaceful, built on the bones of the old. Its chimneys rose like innocent fingers toward the clouds, unaware of what had awakened beneath them. The dragon emerged from the jungle's edge, his scales still bleeding light. Every breath he took shimmered with heat. His eyes glowed like molten suns behind a storm of smoke. He paused, feeling the ground tremble under his talons, and looked upon the world that had forgotten him. Where once he had seen beauty, he saw only echoes of betrayal. The laughter of children in the distant fields felt like mockery. The smell of bread and hearth fire from the cottages struck him like a wound. Everything was calm, too calm, as though the past had never existed. A wind rose behind him, swirling the ashes from his path. The forest whispered in its hollow tongue, a single word. Now. He moved. The earth shuddered as he took to the air, his wings spreading wide, each beat cracking the clouds open. Sparks trailed behind him, and the morning sky turned to storm. Below, hobbits looked up, eyes widening as the shadow covered their fields. They froze in terror, not understanding what they were seeing, only feeling the dread in their bones. A single roar broke the world. Flames cascaded downward in rivers, turning thatched roofs to torches. The ground split under the heat, smoke rising in thick columns. The hobbits ran, scattering like dry leaves, crying out to names that would not save them. The dragon descended, the air burning with every breath. He saw them, their faces so much like those from his memories. Some were children, some carried food. None had ever known his name. But rage had no language left, it only knew direction. He breathed again. Fire devoured the streets, licking up the walls, curling around the bells that once rang for weddings and feasts. The air sang with screams. The dragon's reflection danced in every window, a living inferno. He circled once, twice, a storm of vengeance closing around the village. The smell of char and sorrow filled the wind. Then, between the smoke, he saw her. A small hobbit girl stood beside a well, eyes wide, clutching a wooden charm in her hand. The same sigil he had forged centuries ago, the one he carved for protection. His sigil. Somehow, it had survived. Passed down, kept, remembered. The dragon hesitated. The fire in his throat faltered. Her eyes met his, full of fear, yes, but also something else. Wonder, recognition. The same look his apprentices once gave him when they first saw fire shaped by hand. The storm inside him stuttered. The flames burned cold. He landed heavily, shaking the ground, his wings folding inward. The girl did not run. She stepped closer, her tiny hand lifting the charm high as if to shield her from his wrath. The runes glowed faintly, matching the light of his scales. The air between them shimmered with heat, but her eyes did not waver. In that fragile silence, Thorold Ember saw himself, not as a dragon, not as a monster, but as the man who once taught others how to keep the darkness away. The echo of that man was faint, dying, but it still existed. He lowered his head. For the first time in centuries, his fire dimmed. His breath came as smoke, not flame. The girl trembled, but did not flee. She whispered, voice small but clear enough to pierce the storm. "You're not evil, you're sad." The words broke him. Behind her, the village burned, a sea of red swallowing everything he had ever known, both his creation and his revenge. He felt it then, the weight of all he had done, all that he had lost. Fire had given him life and stolen it again. The curse had not freed him, it had caged him deeper. He looked at the horizon, where the jungle met the sky, the place where he had first awakened. He could almost hear her voice again, the ghost of his apprentice, whispering through the crackle of flame. "When the fire dies, what will be left of you?" He closed his eyes. The dragon lifted his head once more, drawing in one final breath. The sky reddened, clouds splitting with thunder. A roar tore from his throat, not of anger, but release. It rolled across the land like a storm breaking its chains. The fire within him surged outward, consuming the air, the ashes, the sound itself, and then imploded into silence. When the wind returned, the dragon was gone. Only the ashes remained, drifting like snow through the ruins of the Hobbit town. The fires dimmed, the heat fading into a gray stillness. And in the center of the blackened field, beside the old well, the little girl stood unburned. In her palm, the charm still glowed faintly, warm, gentle, alive. Its runes flickered once more before going dark, as though someone, somewhere, had finally gone to sleep. She looked to the horizon, where a faint shimmer of light, not fire, but dawn, broke through the smoke. For a moment, she thought she saw wings there, vast and slow, rising into the mist. Then they were gone. The forest beyond remained silent, yet not dead. Beneath its roots, where embers still glowed faintly in the soil, something stirred, not anger, not pain, but peace. The jungle sighed, and the ashes settled. Far below the earth, in the quiet heart of stone, a single voice whispered like the last flicker of a dying flame. I remember warmth. And then, for the first time in centuries, Thorold Ember rested.